My sister planned a family dinner at an expensive steakhouse without asking and now demands I pay $8,500. It all started with a text from my sister, Amanda. She had decided to organize a family dinner, not just any dinner but an extravagant gathering at one of the priciest steakhouses in town. She pitched it as a special bonding moment, and while I appreciated the sentiment, the choice of venue was baffling. My wife, Sarah, and I are both vegetarians. A steakhouse was the last place we would willingly spend our evening. Amanda, however, brushed off my concerns, assuring me that the restaurant had a wonderful salad bar. Her tone made it clear she wasn't open to suggestions. I chalked it up to her usual way of bulldozing over other people's preferences and decided to let it slide. After all, family events with Amanda were never about compromise. Still, I felt uneasy as I glanced at Sarah, who had overheard the conversation. She shook her head but didn't say anything. We both knew how Amanda operated. The following day, Amanda called again, this time with an added bombshell. She casually mentioned that I would be footing the bill for the entire dinner. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't a small gathering either. She had invited 15 people, including her husband, their 3 kids, and a few extended family members I hadn't seen in years. The total cost? $8,500. My jaw practically hit the floor. I asked her why she assumed I'd pay, and her answer was as nonchalant as it was infuriating. You have your own business, John. This amount is nothing to you. Besides, it's for the family. You'd want to contribute, wouldn't you? The entitlement in her voice was unbearable. It wasn't just about the money, it was the audacity of deciding how I should spend it. I took a moment to compose myself before replying. Amanda, that's an outrageous amount for one dinner. Sarah and I didn't even get a say in this plan, and now you're expecting me to pay? It's not fair. My words didn't even make a dent. Instead, she doubled down, saying that everything was already arranged and backing out now would embarrass her in front of everyone. The audacity didn't stop there. Amanda accused me of being selfish, reminding me of the times she had pitched in for family occasions. Never mind that her contributions were a fraction of what she was asking from me now. Her tone grew sharper as she implied that refusing would show a lack of generosity, painting me as the bad guy before I'd even had a chance to process the situation fully. By the time the call ended, I felt like a cornered animal. Amanda had already told everyone about her grand plans and framed me as the benefactor without so much as a courtesy call to ask if I was okay with it. Worse still, her manipulation worked. A few relatives had already reached out, thanking me for my gesture of kindness. The walls were closing in, and I hadn't even agreed to anything yet. That evening, Sarah and I sat down to discuss it. She was as outraged as I was, pointing out how Amanda's behavior was becoming a recurring pattern. Last Christmas, Amanda had pulled a similar stunt, expecting me to cover the cost of her kids' gifts because she had overspent on decorations. This wasn't about family unity, it was about control and manipulation. I resolved to stand my ground. Amanda might have already set the wheels in motion, but I wasn't going to let her guilt-trip me into a financial black hole. The next day, I called her, prepared to explain my position firmly. What I wasn't prepared for was her reaction. Amanda didn't even let me finish my sentence before launching into a tirade about how ungrateful I was. She accused me of ruining her plans and embarrassing her in front of the family. According to her, I was being petty, especially considering how much I earned. She even threw in a jab about how I'd changed since starting my business, insinuating that success had made me stingy. Her words stung, but they also steeled my resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about standing up to Amanda's constant manipulation. I calmly reiterated that I wasn't going to pay for the dinner and suggested she either cover the costs herself or choose a more affordable venue. Amanda's response? She flat out refused to change the plans, claiming it was too late and that the restaurant wouldn't refund her deposit. By the end of the call, she had managed to twist the narrative entirely, painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. Her parting words were a bitter declaration: "I've already told everyone about the dinner. If you back out now, you'll just prove how little you care about this family." As I hung up, a wave of frustration and disbelief washed over me. Amanda had backed me into a corner, leaving me to choose between looking like the bad guy or caving to her unreasonable demands. The situation felt like a ticking time bomb, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this dinner was only the beginning of a much bigger confrontation. The moment Amanda hung up, I knew I had to act fast. Her stubbornness wasn't just about the dinner, it was about asserting control, and this time, I wasn't going to let her win. The first thing I did was call the Steakhouse. I explained the situation to the manager, who, much to my surprise, was sympathetic. They agreed to cancel the reservation, but with a hefty cancellation fee. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than throwing away $8,500 on a meal no one had asked for. With the reservation cancelled, I shifted gears and started planning an alternative. Sarah suggested hosting the dinner at our home and hiring a caterer. It wasn't just a cost-effective solution, it was a way to regain control of the situation. We found a reputable catering service that offered both vegetarian and meat options, ensuring everyone's preferences were accounted for. The menu included a mix of hearty vegetarian dishes, grilled meats, and an assortment of sides. It was simple yet thoughtful, the kind of meal that wouldn't alienate anyone. Word spread quickly, as it always did in our family. Amanda was the first to call, and she was livid. Her voice dripped with disdain as she accused me of sabotaging her plans. According to her, I had embarrassed her in front of the family and ruined what was supposed to be a special evening. She claimed that no one would take her seriously anymore because I had undermined her authority. Her melodrama was exhausting, but I refused to engage. I calmly explained that this wasn't about her, it was about making the dinner accessible and enjoyable for everyone. Predictably, she didn't see it that way. The backlash didn't stop with Amanda. A few family members reached out, confused and conflicted. Some supported my decision, understanding the financial burden Amanda had tried to impose. Others, however, felt I could have handled it differently, implying that I should have just gone along with her plans to keep the peace. The division was palpable, and it only fueled Amanda's narrative that I was the villain. As the day of the dinner approached, tensions reached a boiling point. Amanda's husband, Mike, sent me a message that was half apology, half threat. He acknowledged that Amanda might have overstepped but insisted that I was being equally unreasonable by canceling the reservation. He suggested that I reimburse Amanda for the cancellation fee, as a gesture of goodwill. The audacity of the request was almost laughable, but I didn't respond. Engaging would only escalate things further. The night of the dinner arrived, and despite the drama, everything seemed to be under control. The caterers set up beautifully, and the aroma of freshly prepared dishes filled the house. Guests began to arrive, mingling in the living room and commenting on the thoughtful menu that catered to both vegetarians and meat lovers. Sarah and I moved between groups, making sure everyone felt welcome. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to think that maybe things would go smoothly. But Amanda hadn't arrived yet. Her absence hung over the evening like a dark cloud. Every time the doorbell rang, my stomach tightened. I couldn't shake the feeling that when she did show up, it would change the entire mood. I noticed a few relatives exchanging uneasy glances, clearly wondering the same thing. Her looming presence, even in absence, was enough to make everyone tread lightly. As more guests settled in, the conversation flowed, and laughter began to fill the room. Yet, in the back of my mind, a persistent unease lingered. I couldn't ignore the possibility that Amanda's arrival would bring with it the storm I'd been bracing for all week. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. That sense of dread was my constant companion as the night progressed. The doorbell rang, and my stomach dropped. I knew it was Amanda. The energy in the room shifted as if everyone collectively held their breath. When I opened the door, there she was, dressed to impress and flanked by her family. Her face bore a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, a clear indication that she had arrived with an agenda. As they stepped inside, Amanda made no effort to mask her disapproval. She scanned the room, her eyes lingering on the buffet table as if mentally calculating every corner I had cut. It didn't take long for her to start. Within minutes, Amanda's voice cut through the hum of conversation. She commented loudly on how simple everything looked, emphasizing the word as if it were an insult. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything. I kept my focus on Sarah, who gave me a reassuring nod. We had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier to endure. The tension escalated when Amanda approached the buffet. She picked up a plate, examined the food as if it were beneath her, and then put it down without taking a single bite. Her actions were calculated, a silent protest designed to draw attention. And it worked. People started whispering, their unease spreading like wildfire. Amanda finally broke the silence by turning to a nearby cousin and remarking that the steakhouse would have been a much better choice. I felt my jaw clench, but I stayed silent. Engaging her now would only give her the satisfaction she was looking for. Sarah, however, wasn't as reserved. She stepped forward, addressing Amanda with a calm but firm tone. She pointed out that the menu had been carefully planned to accommodate everyone and that this was meant to be a family gathering, not a spectacle. Amanda's response was immediate and cutting. She accused Sarah of overstepping and claimed that this dinner was a reflection of my stinginess. Her words stung, but they also sparked something in me. Before I could react, Amanda's husband, Mike, stepped in. He placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered something, clearly trying to de-escalate the situation. Amanda shrugged him off and continued her tirade, growing louder and more aggressive. She painted a picture of herself as the victim, someone whose grand plans had been sabotaged by my selfishness. Her voice rose with each accusation, and I could see the discomfort on everyone's faces. It was unbearable. That's when Sarah decided enough was enough. She stepped in front of me, her voice steady and unwavering. She reminded Amanda of the countless times I had supported her financially, from helping with her kids' school fees to covering unexpected expenses. Sarah didn't raise her voice, but her words carried a weight that silenced the room. She made it clear that this dinner wasn't about money, it was about bringing the family together, something Amanda seemed determined to destroy. Amanda's face turned red, and for a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. The room was deathly quiet, all eyes on her. Finally, she let out a bitter laugh, grabbed her purse, and announced that she wouldn't waste another minute in such a place. She stormed out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, with her family trailing behind her. The door slammed shut, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. The aftermath was chaotic. Some guests tried to downplay what had just happened, while others openly criticized Amanda's behavior. A few even approached Sarah and me, offering words of support and gratitude for hosting the dinner. But the damage had been done. The evening, which had started with so much promise, was now overshadowed by Amanda's outburst. As I stood in the kitchen later that night, replaying the events in my head, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Relief that Amanda was gone, anger at her audacity, and a lingering sadness for the growing rift in our family. This wasn't how I had envisioned the evening, but it was a stark reminder of the dynamics at play. Amanda's need for control had turned what should have been a celebration into yet another battlefield. And while she might have walked out, I knew this was far from over. The storm she had unleashed would ripple through the family for weeks, if not longer. In the days following Amanda's dramatic exit, the fallout was swift and far-reaching. Family group chats lit up with speculation, opinions, and whispered accusations. Amanda wasted no time spinning her version of events, painting herself as the wronged party. According to her, I had deliberately humiliated her in front of the family by undermining her plans and hosting a low-budget dinner. Her words, as exaggerated as they were, found a receptive audience among some relatives who were more than willing to believe her narrative. The phone calls started soon after. First, it was my mother. Her voice carried the familiar tone of disappointment that I had come to dread over the years. She chastised me for being harsh with Amanda, emphasizing how much effort Amanda had put into organizing the original dinner. She seemed oblivious to the financial burden Amanda's plans had placed on me and Sarah. Instead, she focused on the aftermath, lamenting how Amanda had been left feeling embarrassed and disrespected. "She's your sister," my mother reminded me, as if that excused Amanda's behavior. When I tried to explain my side of the story, she brushed it off, saying that family unity was more important than who was right or wrong. To her, my refusal to bend to Amanda's will was the real issue, not Amanda's unreasonable demands. My father's approach was more measured. He called later that evening, his tone calm but weary. He acknowledged that Amanda had overreacted but urged me to find a way to mend the relationship. He reminded me that family conflicts often spiral out of control when left unresolved. While I appreciated his attempt to mediate, his plea for peace felt misplaced. Reconciliation, in his eyes, meant giving Amanda what she wanted, a compromise I wasn't willing to make. Meanwhile, the rest of the family seemed to split into factions. Some, like my cousin Lisa, supported me, recognizing Amanda's behavior as manipulative. Others, however, sided with Amanda, echoing her claims that I had disrespected her. The division only deepened as more relatives chimed in, each adding their perspective to the growing rift. It was exhausting to witness the family unravel over something that could have been avoided with a bit of mutual respect and understanding. Despite the mounting pressure, I decided to take a stand. For years, Amanda had relied on guilt and manipulation to get her way, and I was tired of playing along. I made it clear to Sarah that we would not be apologizing or justifying our actions. Instead, we would focus on protecting our own peace, even if it meant distancing ourselves from Amanda and anyone who enabled her behavior. That decision wasn't easy. Cutting ties with family, even temporarily, felt like a betrayal of the values I had grown up with. But the alternative, continuing to subject myself and Sarah to Amanda's toxic behavior, wasn't sustainable. I knew that setting boundaries would come with its own challenges, particularly as my parents continued to push for reconciliation. Still, it felt like the only way forward. By the end of the week, I had stopped responding to Amanda's calls and messages. The silence was liberating but also heavy with the weight of unspoken words. I knew Amanda wouldn't let this go quietly, and I braced myself for the fallout. For now, though, the distance gave me a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about a dinner or a cancelled reservation, it was about reclaiming control over my life and refusing to be drawn into Amanda's endless cycle of drama. The family tension showed no signs of easing, but I felt a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos. I had made my choice, and while it wasn't the easy path, it was the right one for me and Sarah. Whatever Amanda's next move would be, I was ready to face it on my own terms. The family barbecue at my parents' house was meant to be a casual, pleasant affair, but I knew better. After the fallout from the dinner, the idea of facing Amanda again felt like walking into a lion's den. Sarah and I arrived early, hoping to settle in before the inevitable tension began. The atmosphere was deceptively cheerful as relatives greeted us, but beneath the surface, I could sense the unease. Amanda arrived fashionably late, her usual tactic to ensure all eyes were on her. She strutted into the backyard with a forced smile, scanning the crowd until her gaze landed on me. The energy shifted almost immediately, and it was clear she had no intention of letting bygones be bygones. Her first remarks were aimed at the barbecue setup, commenting loudly about how traditional it was compared to the elegant dinners she used to host. It didn't take long for her to turn her attention to me. The opening salvo came in the form of a passive-aggressive comment about how some people seemed determined to destroy family traditions. Her words were dripping with venom, but her smile never wavered. I ignored her at first, focusing on flipping burgers and chatting with my cousins. But Amanda wasn't one to be ignored. She pressed on, her voice growing louder, accusing me of being selfish and prioritizing my own comfort over the family's happiness. I'd had enough. I turned to her and reminded her of the unreasonable demands she had made, including the $8,500 dinner she expected me to fund without even consulting me. I pointed out how her behavior had repeatedly crossed boundaries, creating unnecessary conflict. My voice was calm but firm, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to hold back. Amanda's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, Sarah stepped in. Her tone was measured but carried an undeniable weight. She outlined, in no uncertain terms, the financial and emotional sacrifices I had made for the family over the years. From helping with Amanda's children's school fees to covering unexpected expenses, Sarah laid everything bare. Her words hung in the air, and I could see the shift in the expressions of those listening. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable, clearly re-evaluating their stance. The silence was broken by my father, who had been quietly observing the exchange. He stepped forward, his voice firm but weary, and demanded that the argument end. He emphasized the importance of unity and urged Amanda and me to move past our differences. But Amanda wasn't ready to let it go. She muttered something under her breath, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the yard, her children trailing behind her. The slam of the gate echoed through the backyard, leaving an awkward silence in its wake. The mood of the barbecue shifted after that. Conversations became hushed, and people avoided eye contact, clearly unsure of what to say or do. A few relatives approached me and Sarah, offering quiet words of support. Others kept their distance, clearly aligning themselves with Amanda. The division in the family was now impossible to ignore, and it left a bitter taste in my mouth. As Sarah and I drove home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling of exhaustion. The confrontation with Amanda had been inevitable, but it didn't make it any less draining. Sarah's support had been unwavering, and for that, I was deeply grateful. She reminded me that standing up for myself wasn't just about the immediate conflict, it was about setting a precedent for the future. In the days that followed, I made a conscious decision to step back from the family drama. Amanda's actions had shown me that some battles weren't worth fighting, especially when the other party was unwilling to meet halfway. I chose to focus on my own family, prioritizing my relationship with Sarah and the life we were building together. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. The family remained divided. Some relatives continued to see me as the villain, blaming me for the ongoing conflict. Others, however, respected my stance and acknowledged the unfairness of Amanda's demands. The divide was painful, but it also brought a sense of clarity. I couldn't control how others perceived me, but I could control how I responded to their behavior. Looking back, the barbecue felt like a turning point. It solidified my resolve to establish boundaries and protect my peace, even if it meant disappointing some family members. Amanda's refusal to acknowledge her role in the conflict only reinforced my decision. I realized that I couldn't sacrifice my own well-being for the sake of maintaining a facade of harmony. True respect, I learned, came from standing firm in my values, even when it meant standing alone.